So for our last lesson in this content, we're going to be working with the formulas that we'll be using to create a standard deviation. And this is a concept that you're not going to learn about for a while, but I'm going to show you some of the little functions that we'll be using when we get to that point, just so you've at least seen them before we get there. So to do this, I want you to create a database for yourself, and I'm going to just give you a way to do this to save you time. So let's go ahead and number our individuals. Let's pretend we're working with students this time. So let's type student 1, student 2, and let's go down and let's get a good number of students because I want to show you something tricky. Let's get around 30 students or more. I got 44. I'm going to stay with 44. And now let's go ahead and enter some data for them. I'm not even going to know. Let's just say this is a score on a test. Okay. And you can just type in some value, let's say between 0 and 100. You could go through and do that for all of them, or we could just tell Excel to give us some values. And this is a function we'll never be using again. But if you want to just have Excel give us some numbers, use this function. Equals rand between, and then put the lowest number you want it to use. Let's say maybe we'll just choose a 5 here, and then put the highest number. And I guess we can have 100. So let's just generate some numbers. It'll save us time. If you don't want to use the function, you can just write numbers in. I'm going to go do this. Equals rand between. I think I had a typo here. Rand between opening parenthesis. And now I'm going to type in 5, and I think I'm going to go 95. I don't think I want it to go all the way up to 100. And you see it gave me a 66. Now I'm going to copy this. And this is where I want to show you a really helpful navigational tool. And I'll demonstrate first. So I'm going to copy this, and it's copying the formula. And now I'm going to click at the top of where I want to paste. And I could just drag it all the way down, but that's a little bit tedious. So I'm actually going to scroll down all the way to the last person, student 44, hold my shift key down, and left click. And now all of these cells below our formula are are highlighted, and we've copied our formula, and now we can use Control V. And so now it's generated a whole bunch of random numbers, just as I wanted it to. And you'll find something weird is going to happen every time you do anything in it. The numbers are all going to change. So if I click here, you see the numbers change. If I click here, let's see if I click on this. So let's add a 2 here. So anytime you do anything in the database, the numbers are going to change because they're random. And so when you get a set that you like, just go ahead and select it. And I'm going to show you how to select it too. So click in the top cell. I don't want you to have to drag all the way down. That's tedious. So at the same time, hold Control and Shift and your down arrow. And now it's selected all of those. Now hit Control C. And now click right, let's click in the cell next to where we had it. And now, instead of hitting Control V, I want you to right click. And you're going to go here to this little clipboard that has the 1, 2, 3 on it. And what that means is paste values. So it's not going to paste the formula anymore, just the values. And so we'll use that. And so now we'll look at and we'll see, okay, these random numbers are still changing. This is the same. If you just wrote in your numbers, you don't have to worry about any of this. So I'm just going to get rid of these. Let's see. I wonder if I should. I'm going to leave those numbers there. Okay. And in fact, I'm going to copy it all the way up to the top. And now let's just do a funny thing. Let's imagine that this is score 1. I don't know what these, whoops. Type right up here. So let's imagine that this is the first score that each of these students got, score 1. And let's imagine that this is the second score, score 2. And here we go. Let's just copy this. And let's There we go. I've selected them and copied them. And now I'm going to paste values in so they stabilize. So I'm going to right click on this little clipboard with the 1, 2, 3, and there we go. So now let's imagine that that's what we had. Now we have 2 sets of scores, and let's imagine that we want to know the difference for each student. We want to know the difference between score A and score B. So before I tell you that, let me write down a couple of the things that I showed you. To select a long set of data, hold, I'm just going to cross that off. Click in first cell of the range, hold Shift, and click in the last cell of the range. That's one tip. The second tip is so also if you want to select a long row, or click in top cell, hold Control plus Shift plus down arrow, or the appropriate arrow. And this moves to the next and selects everything up until the next empty cell. Okay, so that's your little tips there. Let's do a couple of formulas here. So the first thing we want to do is we want to calculate all the differences. So let's type difference. And let's subtract score 1 from score 2. Can I type the word difference? All right, so now let's type equals, and let's click in cell D3 minus C3 and hit enter. And so now we can see that 54 minus 51 is 3. All right, so now let's copy this formula and let's just do our drag. We've got the right arrow, and let's drag to the end of our data set. There's not a super good shortcut for this. And so we'll drag right to here and hit enter. And now it has subtracted all of these differences for us. Let's double check and see if it's right. So here we can see the blue corresponds with the blue. That's what we intended. The red corresponds with the red. So now we have a lot of differences. Now let's imagine that we want to figure out the average of all of these differences. So we want to average this column. So I'm going to make this column a different color so we know we're working now with this blue column. So let's figure out the average of that blue column. So let's start by figuring out the n, the number in the sample. And we could use our count function, or we could just see that we have 44. Our n is 44. So let's get our sum. So this will be equals sum, opening parenthesis. I'm going to click in the top cell that I want. And now I'm going to hold Control Shift and the down arrow. Control Shift down arrow. Now it's selected all of them. And I'll hit enter. And now we know the sum. And so average, whoops, typed in the formula by accident. So let's type equals. And to get our average, we're going to take our sum and divide by the number in our sample. So our average is 4.27. Now let's say that we want to figure out how far each of these scores is from this average. So that's the average difference. Let's go ahead and do this, and we'll call that the deviation. And it's going to be X minus M. And M is another way of saying average. So I'm going to write it here, average. Mean is average. And X is just the scores that we're working with. So here's our X column. So let's go ahead and figure out our deviations, X minus M. We're going to use that $sign, and that's why I'm demonstrating this. So we'll type our equal sign, and we'll click in the first cell in our X column. And now let's do our minus sign, and let's click in our average column. And so now we have, checking it, we have X minus M. It's all correct. Let's copy that and paste it in our next cell and see what happens. So now it's taking this cell, but it's subtracting this cell. So you can see that referential function came into play, that it's going to keep going down this column. And you'll remember what we have to do about that. We have to go ahead and first let's get the formula right. So let's erase this formula, go back to our original formula, and let's put a $sign here. We want it to stay in row 8. That's it. So we'll put a $sign there to tell it stay in row 8. Give it some money, stay there. Now let's copy this. Let's click in the cell below it and use our Control-Shift down arrow. I mean, let's not use our Control-Shift down arrow. You can just see what happened. It went all the way to down to the bottom. We don't want that. That's why we have to just click in that cell, use our white arrow to drag down to the bottom of our data set. And here we are at the end, and we'll hit Control-V. Let's see if it did it right. What a weird set of numbers. This is looking good. It took this number minus this number. How about this? And that looks good too. Very good. So now let's imagine that we want to square all of those. And so let's write X minus M. And let's square. So let's go ahead and use our little asterisk here to indicate what we're doing in this column. So let's go ahead and get this. We're going to take this, click on that, and let's square it. There we go. Now, I don't think we need to hold anything stable, because if I copy this formula and paste it here, I want it to use this cell. So let's go ahead and copy the formula, use the white arrow to drag to the bottom of the set, clicking in the last cell, and hit Control-V. And so now we have the squares of all of these deviations. And so I'm going to move this over using my cut function. And so here we're going to do one last thing, is we're going to add all of those up. We're going to sum all those squared deviations. And then we're going to be done. Equals sum. And I'm going to click in the top cell of what I want to, of my range. Now, because there are data below, I can use Control-Shift and down arrow, and it'll select right to the end of where there's data. And I can hit enter. And this number right here is a number that we're going to be working with quite a lot later in the semester. We call it sum of squares, or SS. And so this is like a sneak preview of things that we have coming up. So I hope this was helpful. This was sort of an optional instruction, but all the practice you do, you'll become very fluent in this, and it will be very helpful to you.